Last week, I left you with the question, what should we give Jesus for Christmas? I still don't have an answer to that question, but it did get me to thinking about another very important question, and that is, what should I give to the people of Elmwood Christian Church for Christmas? And the thing I kept coming back to is a statement that Jesus made near the end of his earthly life when he told his disciples, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." Given all that we've experienced during the past year and all that we have to look forward to in the new year, I can't think of a better gift than the gift of inner peace. Unfortunately, I am not in a position to give you that because peace is something that only God can give, and I'm not God. I'm just one of his adopted children. And the best I can do is show you the path to inner peace. And that's what I intend to do during these next 6 weeks. But before I do that, I think we need to understand why this gift of inner peace is so important. It's important, first of all, because our physical and mental health depends on it. When people are as stressed as we are, and as we have been over the course of these past several months, it tends to wreak havoc on our gut. I'm not a physician and I don't understand all the medical reasons for this, but I do know that when you're under stress, when you're full of anxiety, something happens to your digestive system. And it can cause anything from indigestion and heartburn to irritable bowel syndrome and stomach ulcers. And when those stomach ulcers start to bleed, it can be pretty serious. But stress doesn't just work havoc on our gut, it also wreaks havoc on our immune system. And since our immune system is what helps us to ward off disease, it is very important to our overall health. And that includes our heart health. Because according to one study that I read, a group of 200 high risk individuals were able to reduce their risk of a heart attack by 48% over a 5-year period by engaging in transcendental meditation. And I'm not here to promote transcendental meditation, but I think you get my point. What I'm planning to give you is far greater, far more effective, far more lasting than any kind of meditation we might do. And stress and anxiety are harmful to our health. Keep those two things in mind. And since Jesus is the great physician and the great healer, he wants to give us the inner peace that will overcome all these negative effects of anxiety and stress. And let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of anxiety and stress yet to come. Scientists and public health experts tell us that the worst of the pandemic may still be ahead of us. And if we don't continue to wear masks and practice social distancing, we could be in for another long year of suffering in 2021. And I don't say this to frighten you. I say it because I want you to know the truth about what we are facing and about what Jesus is offering to give us. And if we have this inner peace that only Jesus can give, we'll be absolutely fine no matter what happens. But like I said, I want to be honest with you. And part of being honest is to tell you like it is. And the way things are right now is not particularly encouraging. But if Jesus could tell his disciples the truth about his coming death and about his going away to be with his Father, I can certainly tell you the truth about what I see happening in 2021. And more importantly, I can tell you what Jesus said after he gave his disciples the bad news. And that is, peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. And not just because fear and anxiety are bad for your physical and mental health, because that's just one small part of it. Fear and anxiety also have a negative effect on our spiritual health. The Bible tells us that perfect lives out fear, and that the one who fears is not made perfect or complete in love. That means that fear and love are incompatible with one another. And if we're going to live in God's love and proclaim God's love to others around us, we cannot afford to entertain fear. But there's something else that we need to consider here, and that's our ability to show compassion. If we live in fear, we're going to be too wrapped up in our own struggles to focus on the needs of others. On the other hand, if we have the kind of inner peace that Jesus had, we will be much more compassionate to others. And that's not just my opinion. This was actually confirmed in a study published by the Journal of Psychological Science a few years ago. The study was trying to determine who would be more likely to come to the aid of someone in need. And what they discovered is that 50% of those who participated in meditation, there's meditation again, 50% of those persons acted to help a person in need, while only 15% of people who did nothing to bring peace into their life stepped up to help. And if a meditation written by a human being can have that kind of an effect, imagine what God's peace can do. God's peace that is too great for us even to understand. Imagine how much more peace we can have if we have God's peace. God's peace frees us to love and to care for others instead of just focusing on our own needs all the time. So inner peace is extremely important to our health, both as Christians and as human beings. And right now, our health is not what it should be. As a nation, the signs of dispeace are all around us. Not only are we seeing a rise in alcoholism and drug addiction, and an increase in suicides and homicides, but we are also seeing hate and anger in a way that we've never seen it before. At least I have never seen it this bad before. And I was in college in the 60s when a lot of bad things were happening. But today it feels even worse. And that tells me that inner peace is a gift that all of us could benefit from as we begin this new year. The question is, how are we going to get this inner peace? I'm sure some people would say that the secret to inner peace is therapy. You know, get into counseling, they say, and figure out how your mother screwed up your life. Then you'll have peace. Well, I don't want to give you the impression that I'm against counseling, because I'm not. As a pastor, I do a fair amount of that. And there was a time in my life when that's all I did. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, helping people with their problems. So I'm not against counseling. But if you think that counseling is going to give you inner peace, I beg to differ with you. And as much as I value self-help groups like AA and Al-Anon and OA and NA and all those other groups, I don't believe that's the secret to inner peace either. I've been around groups like this for a long time. And while they may help you to stop drinking or stop overeating or stop being codependent with other people, they don't give you that deep sense of peace and contentment that we all desire. That has to come from within. So does that mean that religion is the answer? No, I don't believe that for a minute. Paul was a very religious man before he became a Christian, a Pharisee, in fact. And in the Jewish religion of first century Palestine, that was a pretty big deal. And from what I know about Scientology, that isn't the answer either. And neither is transcendental meditation. And neither is the power of positive thinking or the power of perpetual spending. If we want real peace, we're going to have to do it God's way. And fortunately for us, God told Paul what his way is. He spelled it out for us in the 4th chapter of Philippians, beginning at verse 6. Listen to what he says. Don't worry. Don't get stressed out about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God your needs and don't forget to thank him for his answers. If you do this, you will experience God's peace, which is far more wonderful than the human mind can understand. His peace will keep your thoughts quiet and at rest as you trust in Christ Jesus. So there you have it. The path to inner peace is prayer. As I go through life, I can either worry or I can pray. Those are my options. But assuming that I decide to accept Paul's advice and pray, what do I say? What do I ask for that will give me peace? Do I return to the prayer that I learned as a child and say, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep? Is that how I find peace in today's world? Or do I recite the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, which I can never seem to remember, and ask God to make me an instrument of his peace, knowing that it is in giving to others that I receive for myself? The theology of that prayer is very sound, but if I can't even remember the words, how can it give me any peace? I'll be so stressed out trying to remember the words that any peace it might bring me will be lost before I finish the prayer. So I don't think that's the answer that I'm looking for. There's only one prayer that I know of that can give me peace. And that's the one that we commonly refer to as the Lord's Prayer. We not only know it by heart, and that's an important element here, but it seems like every phrase in that prayer is purposely designed to give me peace. Jodi Picoult, in her 2008 novel Change of Heart, put it this way. She was talking about some very stressful event that had taken place in her life, and she said, before I realized what I was doing, my mouth had started to form the words, a kind of muscle memory. And to my surprise, instead of it feeling false or forced, it made me relieved, as if I had just passed the baton to someone else. It felt like putting on flannel pajamas on a snowy night, like turning on your blinker for the exit you know will take you home. That's how I feel when I pray this prayer. And it's been at least 65 years since I had any flannel pajamas. But the words are like a muscle memory deep inside me, and they signal my way home. And I know they will remain with me even when my ability to speak is gone. Then, in the stillness and silence of my heart, I will pray, my Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And it will give me peace, just knowing that my God is the very essence of what a father should be. And I'll never be too old for him to hold and to say, my child, do not let your heart be troubled. Do not be afraid. I'm here. I will give you what you need. And when I say the words, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, I'm simply asking God to be God and to do what God wants instead of what I want, and to align my will with his will so we will both want the same thing at the same time. And yet, even as I pray these words, I am acutely aware that every Sunday, and probably every day in between Sundays, millions of people all over the world are praying those words. And yet, they're just words. Because when it comes to submitting one's will to someone else's will, they're not willing to do that. The peace that Jesus is offering continues to elude them. And I want to say, please, God, don't let that happen to me. Help me say what I mean and mean what I say, because I want and I need the peace that only you can give. And if submitting my will to your will is part of the secret to finding that peace, I not only want to say it, but I'll mean it. All I ask is that you show me how to do it. In 2 weeks from today, he's going to do exactly that. He's going to show us how to find peace through surrender. And then on week 3, we're going to learn another prayer. And when I say another prayer, I'm referring to another prayer within the Lord's Prayer, because the Lord's Prayer actually consists of 5 different prayers, all linked together to form one prayer. The prayer that we're going to be looking at in week 3 is the prayer of dependence, which says, give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day what we need to eat. And some say that the Lord's Prayer isn't relevant. Well, I have news for them. Even before the pandemic came along, an estimated 2 billion people around the world were struggling to put food on their tables. And now that number has grown by another 132 million because of COVID. And if you look at what's happening right here in America, more than 35 million Americans, including 10 million children, struggled with food insecurity before the pandemic came along. That's a lot of people. 35 million, including 10 million children. And now that number has skyrocketed to 54 million Americans, including more than 18 million children. That's almost twice as many as before, who are experiencing food insecurity. Now, I know these are just numbers to a lot of people, and numbers are easy to disregard. But to God, they're not just numbers. They are precious human beings who were created in God's own image. Precious human beings whom Jesus died to save. And it causes him great pain and heartache to see them suffering because of hunger. And of course, Jesus was so moved by the hunger of those who came to hear him preach that he performed one of his greatest miracles just to see them fed. So if this part of the Lord's Prayer is irrelevant, I don't know what is relevant. And the same can be said for the 4th prayer that Jesus taught us, the one that says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. This is a prayer of forgiveness, and it includes both confession and release. And like the prayer of dependence, it applies to every single one of us, because as Paul says in his letter to the Romans, all have sinned. All have fallen short of the glory of God. And that means all of us are guilty of something. All of us have fallen short of something. And most of us have fallen short in so many ways we've lost count. And without confession and release, there can be no forgiveness. And without forgiveness of both self and others, there can be no inner peace. Just ask Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman, or Arthur Dimmesdale in The Scarlet Letter, or King David in Who's That Naked Woman Sunbathing on Yonder Roof. They'll tell you. And if they don't feel like talking, ask me, ask anybody, because we all know that peace depends on forgiveness. And forgiveness depends on the confession of our own sin, as well as the release of others who have sinned against us. And we're going to find out how to do both of those things when we get to the fourth part of the Lord's Prayer. But as you know, there's still one prayer we haven't talked about yet, and that's the phrase, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, which is basically a prayer of protection. And who among us doesn't need protection from the evil one? Now, I know that sophisticated people such as yourself may not believe in Satan, certainly not the one with a forked tail and horns, and that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. If you prefer to call him your Mr. Hyde or your sinful human nature, be my guest. You can call him Wee Willie Winkle if it makes you feel any better. But whatever you do, don't underestimate his power. Because like it or not, there is a spiritual force in this world that is diametrically opposed to God. And this spiritual force is doing everything possible to destroy God's dream for us. Paul wrote about this in his letter to the Christians in Ephesus when he said, our struggle is not against people made of flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces of evil. And then he went on to encourage his readers to pray for God's protection so they wouldn't give in to the forces that they were struggling against and lose all the joy and all the peace that God wanted them to have. And here in the last part of the Lord's Prayer, Jesus teaches us how to pray for protection. So I hope you can all be here on February 7th, because this is not only the day of our annual meeting, but it's also the day that we find out how to fight Wee Willie Winkle and win. And again, please don't let that name fool you, because what we are dealing with here is a formidable force. It's going to take a lot of prayer to bring him down. But I can't think of anything I would rather give you for Christmas than God's peace. And I'm telling you this now because our 12 days of Christmas are almost over. They'll be over on Tuesday of this week. And I didn't want you to think I'd forgotten to put you on my Christmas list. But to receive this gift, you have to come and partake. And that's what I'm asking you to do for the next 5 weeks. Come and partake of God's peace, just as we now come to the Lord's table